Today we're going to look at negative numbers and think positively about negative numbers. For reference, you can look at page 216 in your textbook. Our three objectives are to be able to explain what we mean by a negative number, to be able to add and subtract negative numbers, and finally to be able to use negative numbers in the real world, real examples of negative numbers. But first of all, let's understand what we mean by numbers. You'll be introduced to numbers like 2, 4, 11 and 15. We refer to these numbers as integers. They are whole numbers, no decimals, no fractions, just integers. These are all positive numbers. But there exist other integers, very similar to the ones we've just seen, but they're negative. And what's the main difference between them? Well, just visually, they've got a negative sign in front of the numbers, but really they're the same as the ones above. But is there any other difference between 2, 4, 11 and 15, the positive numbers, and minus 2, minus 4, minus 11 and minus 15, the negative numbers? Well, let's look at an example and see if we can discern what the difference might be. Imagine you've got 2 cows in a field. We use this number for counting. What difference is there between that 2 and a negative 2? In other words, can you have negative 2 cows? And what would it mean to have a negative 2 cows? What does it really mean to have negative 2 cows? Perhaps it would be easier to understand what the negative means if we looked at money instead of cows. So for example, on the left I've got £5, on the right I've got negative £5. Is it easier to understand now what a negative 5 might look like? Maybe not yet. So let's go back in time. It might be easier to understand what's going on and how we use negative numbers if we remind ourselves of the concept of the number line. This thing here. On this number line, numbers to the right, that's the blue numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are becoming more positive as you go to the right. And on the left on the number line, the red numbers, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, are becoming more negative as you go to the left. Now we're going to take our idea of integers and the number line and put them together. So let's put up our number line again. All the numbers to the right are blue, and they're getting positive as you go to the right. All the numbers on the left, the red ones, becoming more negative as you go to the left. I'll take the midpoint as 0, and I'll start off by trying to do the sum 2 plus 3. So let's mark up 2 on the number line. There it is. Now I'm going to add 3 in steps of 1. So here goes. I'm going to go to the right to make it more positive. Plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So I've added 3 all together, getting to my final point just above the 5. So 2 plus 3, according to this number line, is equal to 5. Or put it in words, add 3 to 2 to get 5. Add 3 to 2 to get 5. We're becoming more positive. We started off with a small number like 2, and we've ended up with a bigger number, more positive, 5. Let's try another example. Again, we'll put down our number line, put down the blue numbers and the red numbers, and we'll start with our midpoint again. And this time we're going to take 2, take away 5. So we'll mark up our 2 on the line, and we'll take away 5. We're going to move to the left. We're going to become less positive, more negative. There's our first one, next one, next one, and finally we take away 5, and we end up just above the minus 3. So 2 take away 5 gives me minus 3. Take away 5 from 3 to get minus 3 is what we've just done. So in English, take away 5 from 2 to get minus 3. We've become more negative. So let's just look at one more example of this, a finished solution. We start off with the minus 2, we add 3, and we'll end up with a plus 1. On the number line, you can see we started off at the minus 2, that's the yellow marker. We've stepped to the right, we're adding something, so we're becoming more positive. We're moving to the right, plus 1, plus another 1, plus 1 till we've added 3, and we end up with the 1. In English, add 3 to minus 2 to get 1. We've become more positive. So that's all that's happening on the number line as we play around with these integers positive and negative. Now we've also got to remind you of certain operators. We've been using one here, the equal sign, but we've also got the less than sign and the greater than sign. If we use examples, it becomes clear how they're used. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. Or we could say 2 is less than 4. 2 is smaller, has less value than 4. Or we could say again, 4 is greater than 2. 4 is a bigger number than 2. Let's put these ideas of the greater than, less than symbols with the integers on a number line. So we'll start off with minus 2 is less than plus 2, or plus 2 is greater than minus 2. On a number line it looks like this. To go from 2 to minus 2, we have to go more negative. We're going to the left. Another example, minus 4 is less than minus 2. Is that obvious? Minus 4 is a bigger number, but it actually represents a smaller value than minus 2. On a number line it looks like this. To go from minus 2 to minus 4, I'm going to the left hand side and becoming more negative. So minus 4, even though it's a bigger number than minus 2, is actually a smaller value. And finally, minus 2 is greater than minus 4. Minus 2 is greater than minus 4. We're saying basically that minus 2 represents a bigger value than minus 4, even though 4 is a bigger number than 2. On a number line it looks like this. To go from minus 4 to minus 2, I'm going to the right. I'm becoming more positive. So minus 2 is a bigger value. Now we've got one more idea we need to introduce, and that is how we take combinations of pluses and minus when we're adding and subtracting. So here's an example where 4 take away 2 equals something. Now straight away I'm sure you're going to work out the answer's 2, because we're going to end up with something that's smaller, less positive than we had before. If you take away 2 from 4, you've got less than what you had when you started. We end up with 2. What about 4 take away a negative 2? 4 take away a negative 2. You want to take away a negative. You want to end up more positive than you started. More positive. So a negative of a negative actually gives us a positive. So 4 take away a 2 ends up as being 4 plus 2 equals 6. Is 6 bigger than 4? Yes. So we have ended up more positive. And our last example, 4 plus a minus 2. I'm going to add a negative to the pot. I'm going to take a 4 and add a negative. If I add a negative, I'll become less positive. In other words, the plus and the minus combination ends up with a minus. I end up with 4 take away 2, which equals 2. Am I less positive? Yes, I am. Now we'll look at some examples from your textbook to see how that works. In your textbook, the first example is minus 3 and negative 3, take away a negative 1. Now if you're taking away a negative 1, you're going to end up more positive. So the negative negative is actually a positive. You end up with minus 3 plus the 1, minus 3 plus the 1. On the number line, we're moving to the right. We're moving more positive, so we end up with minus 2. Another example, 4 take away a positive 7, a plus 7. Well, you're taking away a 7. The negative and the positive combination gives us a negative. So it actually turns out to be 4 take away 7. If you're taking away 7 from 4, you're becoming less positive, more negative, so you end up with a number which is more negative, minus 3. Two more examples. 6 plus a minus 7. Well, you're adding a negative again. If you're adding a negative, you're becoming less positive and more negative. A plus minus combination gives you a minus. 6 takes away 7, ends up with minus 1. And again, you can check that on the number line to satisfy yourself that that's correct. Last example, a negative 3 added to a negative 2. If you add a negative, you're going to become more negative, less positive. Adding a negative, less positive, more negative. So that plus negative combination ends up with a negative, a minus 3 and a minus 2 together gives you a minus 5. Did you become more negative? Yes, you did. And with all that information, it's now really time to try and practice some of these ideas. So we need to turn back to the textbook and have a look at exercise 1M. This is on page 216. If we look at question 1, we'll start off by looking at part A, 5 plus a minus 6. So bear in mind when we look at this answer, there's more in the answer than you actually need to write out yourself. We're showing basically all the detail so you understand the thought processes behind getting the answer. So we start off then with part A, 5 add a negative 6. 5 add a negative 6. Now if you add a negative, you move to the left on the number line, and therefore you're actually taking away. So this combination of plus and minus becomes a minus. In other words, you become more negative. 5 plus a minus 6 goes to 5 take away 6, which becomes minus 1. On the number line, we start here at 5 and we take away 6, going to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we end up at minus 1. So we've started positive, we've gone in the negative direction, and as it turns out, we've ended up with a negative number. And you should approach all of the other questions in this part of the work in a similar vein. Now let's look at part B, where we've got 2 take away a negative 4. So it reads as 2 take away a negative 4. The take away itself means negative. I'm not giving something, I'm taking something away. It's not positive. Now when I do this, I'm actually taking away something that you owe. I'm taking away a debt. I owed you 4 and I'm taking that 4 away. You don't owe it to me anymore. I'm making you feel better. You don't owe me. You owed me 4. I take away that debt. You don't owe me anymore. So you feel better off. You feel more positive. In other words, you're moving in the positive direction on the number line. You're becoming more positive. And negative is a positive. You've gone from this 2 here, that's your start, 2, and you've moved to the right 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and ended up at 6. That's your finishing point in a positive direction. So the answer is going to be 2 take away a negative 4 becomes 2 plus 4, which gives us the answer 6. And finally, let's look at part G on the same question number 1. It says we've got a minus 5 and we take away a negative 3. Now we're starting with a negative 5 and we're taking away a negative 3. A negative combination will give me a positive. So this boils down to minus 5 plus 3. If you add 3 to a minus 5, you're becoming more positive, so you end up with minus 2. And minus 2 is to the right of minus 5 on the number line. You're going in the positive direction. So we start over here at minus 5. We add a 3. 1, 2, 3. We end up at minus 2, the finish. So we have moved positively and we've ended up with a bigger value in terms of the number. Your job now is to have a go at exercise 1M on page 216. I've done 3 parts of question 1, but have a go at all the questions in that exercise and see how you get on with it.